I was going to talk about the economy in Guild Wars 2, but as ArenaNet has pointed out, they've taken down the auction house, trading post. But fortunately, 15% of the player base, a random selection thereof, do have access to the auction house. However, I'm not one of them. I guess that makes me a member of the 85%. Well, let's go take a look at their economy anyway. When an economist looks at an MMO game, or even an anthropologist, we like to look at where people get their stuff, what they do, how they do it. And so, for the first part of the economy of Guild Wars 2, the economist decided to break down where all the gold was earned. Looking at the game, most of the gold, 31%, was coming from rewards. This was things like looking at the entire map, doing a daily quest, which are really more of a gamification of the game, where if you do something like craft enough, or you kill enough things in a day, or you dig up enough ore in a day, you get a reward. Often that includes money. There's dailies and monthlies that can do it. The next down the line at 25% was from dynamic events. Dynamic events are these things, these quests that just pop up in the world as you're rushing past. People crying out for help as their cattle are being attacked by raiders, or their tree is being chewed down by termites, and you rush in there with a shovel, sword, gun, whatever, and save their day. You receive some gold from that alongside experience and the social experience of rushing in there with a group. Often, the more people who involve themselves in the events, the more gold or completion that comes out of them. That's one thing that I'm really liking about Guild Wars 2 is that there's a huge cooperation benefit. It strongly encourages the gamification of people coming together to complete an event to earn more from it. Finally, tasks made up 23%, kills made up 12%, quests, as in more or less Guild Wars has this sort of Star Wars Online style chapter system where your character, like Helvetica here, has a specific story that she's following along and getting quests from NPCs. And finally, interactive objects, which are things that you can pick up from the world, like random chests, came in at 1%. Well, let's move on to the next area and look at the part of the game that I'm most interested in, which is the professions and crafting. Crafting, I would say, drives a large part of a lot of MMO economies. The ability for players to create things in-game and sell them to other individuals, primarily by way of using the in-game economy, or metrics such as gold from World of Warcraft, etc. Star Trek Online does the same thing, except for they don't really have that good of a crafting system. Guild Wars' crafting system appears to be very versatile. There's cooks, artificers, huntsmen, weaponsmith, armorsmith, tailors, leatherworkers, and jewelers. And there's no profession that is specific to gathering, so you can gather things all day long by spending a little money on the tools that necessary to pick them up, and then you can sell them to crafters. Looking at the professions, from the beta weekend it looks like there was a gigantic skew towards one profession in particular, and that happened to be the jeweler, who can receive their items from people who are using pickaxes against veins, picking up jewels and precious gems and stuff like that. And looking at it, there were over 60,000 people, I believe, or perhaps 60,000 pieces of gold made from the jeweling profession. The next two highest were leatherworking and tailoring, followed by armorsmithing, weaponsmithing, huntsman, artificer, and the worst, people were really not interested in cooking at all. If this maintains this when we hit Guild Wars 2 open, which it is now, and when the auction house opens up, which it isn't at this moment, you try to open it up and you get this huge blue sleeping whale-like creature that says, sorry, we're down for maintenance. Obviously, if you're not in that 15%, you're not going to be able to sell your stuff on the auction house, and that's where you're going to make your money. But for people interested in making money in Guild Wars 2, the jeweler profession could be where you go to discover a lot of people making money, and that means that a lot of people are buying, a lot of people are selling, but it also means there's a ridiculous amount of, well, competition. However, this would be great for people collecting gems to sell it to the jewelers, because if they're selling boatloads to people out there, then suddenly gemstones and jewels in the environment are exactly what that economy is going to want. So you may not make as much money cutting and selling gems because of all the competition, but you might discover yourself making a lot of money if you go out collecting and sell it to the eager crafters who are, well, looking forward to selling it to eager customers. Let's move on to another section of the city so I can show you this lovely place, and I'll continue with the wealth distribution portion of Guild Wars 2. Well, it looks like by the end of the Guild Wars 2 beta events, they had a little bit better of a wealth distribution than the United States, with 85% of the wealth being controlled by 50% of the population, which, different from the United States in 2007, 20% of the population controlled 85% of the wealth. You tell that to the 99%ers. What really caught my attention is this part of the graph down here, which has to do with the trading post purchases and the currency exchange. In Guild Wars 2, there is a type of currency which is essentially a freemium currency called a gem. If you've listened to my posts about speaking about Star Wars Online and the Dilithium exchange and how Dilithium can be traded for C points in the C store, the gem is basically the currency of Guild Wars 2 that allows you to buy services and for pay items. Interestingly enough, that means that people are able to trade in-game gold for the for-pay gems, and vice versa, meaning that the split between the two type of players, especially in the free-to-play market, although I should point out that Guild Wars 2 is a buy-to-play game, which means that it's outside of the free-to-play market. You have to buy the box in order to get into the game, which means that the freemium aspect is kind of like icing on the cake. Now, you can use your in-game gold to buy gems, which is a very interesting facet that I've studied in Star Wars Online, but here it means that people who have bought the game will still have access to the freemium even though they're not spending money, which means that people with very little time but with a lot of money, like because they work all the time, will be able to buy gems directly and then sell it to people in the game in order to get in-game gold, and vice versa. People with a lot of time to play the game, who can make a lot of gold, can buy into the in-game freemium currency by buying it from the people who have very little time but a lot of money, enabling them to be part of the paying for the game experience. The currency exchange, the economist compared it to Facebook stock in order to show how the economy shifted at the same time as coins per gem, but I don't really see that as being all that interesting. I'm more interested in what this will look like once the game is launched and we have months and months of data to look at. You can go to my Star Trek Online examination of the Dilithium versus C points economy to see how people interacted with that and how that changed the game. So now I'm going to move on to one more location, and we'll wrap this up. I thought this stained glass thing was really amusing, so I figured we'd conclude here. Pretty much the way that I see it, ArenaNet has done a good job of integrating a vast crafting system, the ability for people to not just consume, but are able to collect items wherever they like. They don't need a profession to do it like in World of Warcraft. It's much more like Star Trek Online, where you can just pull things out of the ground and run around, and you can be a collector and deliver that into the trading post, which is their name for the auction house. And part of the auction house means that you can get gold, in-game gold that way, and you can take your in-game gold and turn it into the freemium currency. It's really weird saying freemium with a game that you have to buy with a $60 box price, but that's exactly what it is. If this was a free-to-play game, the gems would be the freemium currency. In a sort of way, I think this is the way that ArenaNet wants to, well, take up the subscription basis, because this game has no subscription model. You just buy the box and you can play all you like. From looking at it, most of the trading post purchases from the beta weekend are about crafting materials, and looking at how much money was transferred, especially involved in the jewel crafting profession, this is going to be where the big money is. There's going to be people who essentially farm, who then pour money into the trading post, and then people who buy from that. And the fact that they have the gem to gold transfer, which is almost like a real money transfer, except for the money never leaves the game, will probably stifle the gold farming. Primarily because gold farmers are going to need to be able to get the money out of the game somehow, and if enough players are pouring money into gems and trading that for gold, that means that there's very few people who are going to be willing to pay gold farmers for a ridiculous amount of gold. They're going to be undercut by ArenaNet's own internal system for gaining gold. Now, we might still see other games like Guild Wars 2, Warcraft, etc. look into real money transfers, just like Blizzard's Diablo 3, a system which I spoke about in another video. But in this case, most free-to-play games and now this buy-to-play game are looking into a way to provide services and undercut gold farming and gold selling by enabling players to buy into it, because in a sort of way, buying gems enables you to buy gold out of the game, and at the same time, give money to ArenaNet and NCSoft, the publisher, essentially making gold farming a little bit less lucrative than it would be in a game like World of Warcraft. Meanwhile, I hope all of you enjoy this vista that I've got in the grove amid the people of the Pale Tree. And this has been another MMO Anthropology. Good night, and good dreams. As always, this has been an episode of MMO Anthropology. Thank you for coming along, and I hope that you liked what you watched about Guild Wars 2. Be sure to come back, make sure that you subscribe, leave me a comment, and hopefully a like, or all your equipment will explode.